By midnight, the Valhalla looked less like a ship than a promise stamped in gold. She was one of those long-haul luxury liners that carried wealthy passengers between resort worlds and sold the voyage as hard as the destination. The Grand Lounge still held the tail end of a charity dinner for men who liked their names carved into walls. I came through after them with a grey waistcart, a scraper, and a ring of service keys heavy enough to bruise a thigh through cloth. The passengers had gone soft around the edges with drink and praise. Glasses stood in clusters on side tables. A heel mark crossed one cream runner. Red sauce had dried in a seam beneath a carved wall panel meant to look like old wood from some country house none of them had ever chopped for winter. My job covered all of it. I cleaned the parts of luxury that shed first. That gave me a better map of the ship than any officer carried in his head. Hank Foster, janitorial division, utility access on every guest deck, leak calls, stuck doors, clogged sinks, broken trims, cracked seals, and whatever else turned up after the guests went to bed. If a room stopped pretending to be effortless, somebody called me. Most of them never really looked. They looked through, around, or past. A woman in a silver dress stepped around my cart as if it had rolled there by itself. Her bracelet snagged on a tray lip and snapped. Stones scattered over the runner. She stared at them, then at me, waiting for the world to kneel. "I'll get those before the vacuum pass," I said. She drifted toward the lifts without answering. One stone had lodged in the carpet seam. I dug it out with a thumbnail and dropped it in the lost property tin clipped to the cart. At the far end of the lounge, Jade Quinn came through the service door with 2 folded tablecloths over one arm. Cabin steward blacks, sleeves rolled, dark hair pinned back in a way that had surrendered halfway through the shift. She was 26, quick with a joke, hard on drunks, and one of the few people on board who still used my name when she needed nothing from me. "You're doing the Meridian too?" she asked. "Sink, latch, 2 spills," she made a face. A man in suite 1211 threw up in the bidet and blamed the angle of the room. "Rich enough to think gravity is a service?" That pulled half a smile out of her. Then she was gone through the side corridor, and I was back to polishing away evidence that pleasure had weight. Up front, beyond the smoked glass wall, stars spread clean and hard across the observation dome. The Meridian room sat at the bow, a showpiece lounge where passengers could sip expensive liquor and pretend the ship belonged to romance instead of accountants. I had 2 spills to strip there, one snapped latch on a display cabinet and a blocked service sink behind the bar. I was on one knee under the cabinet when Captain Haldane came through. Haldane was the public face of the Valhalla, hired as much for silver hair and broad shoulders as for his command record. He had that passenger smile officers learn when the company needs a father, a host, and a priest with good posture. Behind him came Security Chief Renner, thick through the chest, sidearm worn low and visible. Haldane glanced at the cabinet latch. "Can you have that presentable before breakfast? It'll close clean before I leave the deck." That suited him. He gave a small nod and moved on. Command likes competence, so long as competence keeps its eyes down. I fixed the latch, cleared the sink trap, and rolled my cart toward the forward service door. The deck lights dipped once. The motion came through the floor first, a side pull that made glass sing inside the racks. People looked up together. Rich men hate surprise because it reminds them the universe has interests of its own. 3 slow chimes sounded over the ship. Then the captain's voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain where you are while we confirm an unscheduled approach. Staff will assist you." The room broke into talk all at once. Trouble arrives. Then everyone tries to make it his own. I pushed through the service door into the staff passage and cut toward a forward observation slit I used on long nights when I wanted one clean look at space before mopping someone's vomit out of a stairwell. The slit was a narrow strip of armoured glass between 2 cable trunks. You had to lean to use it. Something blocked the stars. At first I took it for salvage or wreckage. Then the shape settled against the black and every line sharpened. A house hung outside the Valhalla, an upside-down suburban house from old entertainment feeds, complete with pitched roof, chimney, curtained windows, porch steps, and a lamp burning under the porch ceiling. The roof pointed into space like a spearhead. The front door faced us. White siding wrapped the walls in neat horizontal runs. A station wagon sat in what would have been the driveway if gravity still meant anything to it. I stood there with my scraper in hand, while the thing drifted close enough for me to make out flower boxes beneath the windows. The chime sounded again. A sharper voice came over the system this time. Renner from security, telling all crew to report to emergency posts if assigned. My emergency role was simple: clear routes, assist passengers, keep people moving, and stay out of the officers' way unless they needed a locked panel opened. The house touched us without a jolt. Docking clamps should have screamed through the hull. Instead, a light pressure came through the deck, like somebody leaning one palm against the ship from outside. Airlock status lamps down the forward passage shifted from green to white. I went back through the service door into the meridian room. Guests crowded the observation glass with their drinks still in hand. One man laughed the way men laugh when terror looks too foolish to honor. "Publicity stunt," he said. "Some themed tender." No one answered him. The house had drifted so close that the curtained windows filled half the dome. The curtains hung in little pinched folds. A woman's silhouette stood behind one window for a breath, then slid away. The porch lamp glowed over the upside-down door. The inner airlock opened. 5 men stepped through. Each wore the same ash-grey suit, white shirt, thin black tie, bright enamel name badge, and shoes polished to a black mirror. Their hair sat in the same side part, dark and glossy. Their smiles had been painted on, the red laid thick at the lips and drawn too far toward the cheeks. The mouths stayed fixed while the rest of the face moved around them. Each man wheeled a refrigerator dolly. The refrigerators looked built for a rich suburban kitchen 60 years dead. Rounded corners, chrome handles, white enamel sides, a tiny starburst badge on each door, stamped in blue. The room fell quiet enough for me to hear the casters tick over the deck seams. Captain Haldane crossed the lounge with Renner and 4 security men at his heels. He had his dress coat open now. Renner already had his pistol in hand. "You are aboard a civilian vessel under charter law," Haldane said. "State your business." The lead salesman tipped his head toward me before answering. His eyes were the color of sink water and held no more life than that. "Restoration," he said. "Household restoration under resident authority." Haldane stepped closer. "Return to your craft at once," Renner said, low and urgent. "Captain." Haldane took the pistol from Renner's hand. He aimed with both hands, old academy form dressed up for the guests, and fired one round through the salesman's forehead. The shot should have cracked the room open. Instead, the sound cut off in the middle, as if a knife had gone through it. The bullet hung between Haldane and the salesman, a bright brass bead turning so slowly that the spin only showed itself by degrees. Around it drifted glittering grains, like frost shaken from invisible cloth. One of the salesmen rolled his refrigerator into the main corridor off the lounge. He swung the door open. The corridor changed. A porter came through the side lift with a guest coat over one arm. He lifted the coat toward the brass hooks by the entrance, then stepped back half a stride. The motion looped. He came through the side lift again. The same patient smile sat on his face. The same coat hung from his wrist. A woman in travel clothes entered behind him, smoothing her hair with tired fingers. She crossed to the mirror. She vanished. She entered again. The coat lifted. The hook waited. People in the lounge screamed. Haldane turned toward the corridor, still holding the frozen posture of a man who expected recoil a second ago, and had been denied it. Renner shoved one passenger down behind a sofa. Another security man backed towards the airlock with his gun raised. The lead salesman looked past the captain again and found me by the service door. "Mr. Foster," he said softly, like a maitre d' remembering a reservation. "We have begun." I ran. A janitor on a passenger ship survives through roots, not courage. Courage belongs to men with speeches. Roots belong to the men who empty the bins after the speeches are done. I cut through the service pantry behind the Meridian bar, through the linen cage, then down the staff stair to deck 12, where the entertainment suites met the family cabins. My radio burst with voices. None stayed clear for long. Passengers trapped in a loop near the forward lifts. Security requesting engineering support. Engineering shouting back about an engine alarm and something being removed from the fusion spine. That last part stopped me so hard my shoulder hit the rail. The fusion spine was the line of power chambers that drove the Valhalla between stars. Plain speech called them engines. Nobody removed that while the ship still lived. I took the stairs 3 at a time and hit the Deck 12 service corridor at a run. Gerald, a pantry boy from Night Galley, came at me from the far end with dish foam up to both wrists. "The walls are wrong," he said. "Sir, the walls are wrong." "Where?" "Family deck lounge. I brought towels. The room keeps sending me back to the door." "Get to the scullery and bar the rolling shutters." His eyes kept darting over my shoulder. "What is happening?" "Keep the lights on and count heads if anybody comes in." He ran. I headed for the family lounge because that deck sat between passenger cabins and 2 major service trunks. If the thing spreading there reached the trunk routes, half the ship would be hard to cross. The family lounge stood open beneath a sign that still promised games, films, and supervised play. Inside, the room had gone dim and close, in a way no luxury space had any business doing. The picture wall had turned itself into a bright window above a flowered sofa. A lamp with a pleated shade threw a warm pool across the carpet. A boy of about 8 ran in from the left, dragging a toy shuttle on a string. He cut across the room. A woman called from somewhere beyond sight. "Shoes off before supper." The boy skidded, grinned, and vanished at the far arch. Then he came in from the left again, dragging the shuttle. 3 real passengers stood near the snack counter. One was a mother with blood on her shin where she'd gone down against a stool. The other 2 were older men from one of the gaming suites. They had the glassy stare of people held inside panic too long. "Back away from the middle," I said. "Stay near the door." The mother clutched a little girl to her side. "My son is in there." The running boy came through again. He was not hers. Same face, same grin, same bright little clack of shuttle against the carpet. The girl buried her face in her mother's hip. A service hatch sat half hidden behind the drink station. I knew it. It led to a crawl space carrying lines for the ice dispensers and wall screens, too small for comfort. Big enough for me if I turned my shoulders. "Listen," I said, "this room wants you to leave the way you came in. We go through the wall." One of the old men snapped. "What sort of sentence is that?" "The useful sort." I kicked the latch cover aside, got the hatch open, and shoved a bag of paper cups out of the way. Frost had started on the bolts. The mother thrust the girl toward me first. Good woman. She understood order of business. I slid the child through. "Crawl until you hit the ladder. Hold there." She went. The mother followed. The old men needed cursing, but they went too. I hauled the hatch half shut behind us and crab-walked through the dark with my cheek against pipe insulation and my keys digging into my hip. Behind the wall, the room kept looping, the toy shuttle tapping the panel every cycle with the same bright little clack. We came out in a storage alcove on the next corridor. The child scrambled down the ladder and wrapped herself around her mother's leg. One of the men bent over and retched. The mother caught my sleeve. "My husband is in the casino on 11. I'm clearing routes, not collecting every soul one by one." The words came out harder than I meant. Her face changed at once. A housekeeping man came through the far door pushing a half-loaded linen cart. He froze when he saw us. "Jade's trapped in the promenade," he said. "She keeps walking back to the same vase. I tried 3 times. The name hit harder than the mother's plea had. I knew Jade's stride, her laugh, the look she got when a drunk snapped fingers at her like she was a call service. "Take them to Scullery Station 12, I said. "Shutters down, lights on, count heads." He opened his mouth with another plea for Jade. "Do that first." He swallowed it and moved. The deck trembled underfoot with a new kind of vibration, not ship drive but something heavier and ruder, like great cabinets being dragged into place and bolted down. The engines. I cut aft toward the service lift cluster and ran straight into Captain Haldane. He had lost his coat. Blood trickled from a cut along one temple. Renner was gone. 2 security men stood with him, faces grey, guns drawn toward nothing in particular. "Foster," Haldane said, "you know the maintenance arteries. The ship is full of them. You will guide us to engineering by the hidden route." He spoke as if command still meant what it had an hour ago. His eyes gave away the damage. He had seen something in that corridor at the Meridian that no officer ever trains for, because training assumes the world will keep its bargains. "What happened to Renner?" "He engaged near the forward gallery. The space there ceased to progress. He remains in place." That was a fine officer's sentence for a man swallowed by a hallway. "We must seal engineering before those things complete the conversion," Haldane said. "Take us below through the service guts." I could have left him. The lift route behind us would have taken me straight down to a cargo corridor and maybe away from whatever swallowed the spine. Instead, I turned. That choice put the rest of the night on its rails. The hidden route started behind a false wine display in a premium dining annex. Cruise ships love secret glamour for passengers and secret ugliness for workers. Pull the display, trip the service catch, and a vertical shaft opened behind the rack. Cargo ladders, conduit runs, drainage lines, and the warm breath of used air moving through the dark. I climbed first with my flashlight between my teeth. Below us, the Valhalla carried her usual life sound through the frame. Pumps, current, distant strain. But another note had entered it now. A cabinet rattle deep in the bones, spreading section by section like new weather. Haldane climbed badly. He had off his shoulders. Security work during passenger cruises had softened the rest. We came out 3 decks lower in a cleaning depot near the lower galley. Men had abandoned trays on prep counters. A saucepan lay on the floor where somebody had dropped it. Through the far service door, the galley line had turned into something out of an old advertisement. Chrome-edged counters, checked floor, broad white cupboards, every cook trapped in the instant before service. A ladle hung above a pot. Steam stood over the range and failed to rise. One of the security men made a noise in his throat. "We keep moving," Haldane said. It was the last place command would ever sound that sure. The engine section sat beyond cargo staging, laundry exchanges and machine spaces where passengers never came. Luxury died there. Bare deck plating, cable trunks thick as tree boles, white paint over old repairs. Every scuff told the truth about a ship. That part belonged to men like me. A cargo hatch stood open ahead. Haldane raised his pistol. The 2 guards spread out with him. I stayed by the jam where sensible men stay when officers decide to prove themselves. The engine room beyond had been gutted. The fusion chambers, huge bottle-shaped units that once held the ship's jump power, were gone down to their mounting wells. In their place stood rows of refrigerators, door to door, white sides gleaming under work lamps. Copper-coloured lines ran from their backs into the deck where the power couplings used to feed. Frost filmed the gratings around them. The ship's current was still moving, but rerouted, domesticated, made to run through the white boxes instead of the chambers that had once bent space for us. 3 salesmen crossed between the units carrying trays of bolts and polished handles. At the far end, where the chief engineer's control dais should have overlooked the spine, a breakfast nook had been built beneath a hanging lamp. 2 chairs, a little table, a bowl of fake fruit. Haldane stared at it for half a second, then his face hardened into something brittle. "Fire at will," he said. He stepped through the hatch and fired twice before the guards followed. The first round struck a salesman in the chest. White enamel dust sprayed out of the suit as if he'd been packed with porcelain chips. He bent backward and kept smiling. Then every refrigerator door on the near row swung open at once. Cold hit the room so hard the air seemed to seize around the sound of the guns. One guard froze mid-stride with his mouth open around a shouted order. Haldane turned toward me, arm half raised for another shot, and stayed there. His hair had lifted from the force of his own motion and never settled. The brass from his pistol hung beside his wrist. A single red bead of blood poised on the ridge of his cheek where the cut ran down from his temple. The other guard made it 2 more steps before his legs entered the arrested strip near the threshold. He became a statue leaning into his own run. I dropped flat and slid sideways under a tool bench built against the wall. A pair of polished shoes crossed my view. No dust in the seam. "Your uniformed people mistake display for structure," said the lead voice. I knew it already. Mr. Cordell crouched and looked under the bench with me. Up close the face gave up more wrongness. The skin above his upper lip carried no pores. The painted smile sat on flesh that shifted under it in tiny independent movements, like an image pasted over living contents. "You keep excellent roots, Mr. Foster," he said. "You know where the ship actually breathes. Get away from me." He reached past my boot and tapped the floor hatch beneath my shoulders. "Go below and inspect the service core. A home stands or fails by its hidden systems. You ripped the heart out of this ship." He tilted his head. "We replaced the transit core with household function. The old engine pushed outward. A household draws inward. It keeps, sorts, returns." Then with a warmth that made my skin tighten, "You, above all, should appreciate the difference." He stood and stepped away. The others ignored me. One was fitting a chrome trim plate over the place where a power distribution column had stood that morning. I got the hatch open, swung my legs through, and let gravity take me into the dark. The drop ended in stacked laundry bags and old filter housings. Pain shot up one ankle. I bit it off before it could make a sound. Above me, the engine deck stayed trapped in that ruined tableau. Captain Haldane and his men had become figures in a lesson on why command and force fail inside another creature's idea of order. The space below the engines was a utility crawl, shoulder high in places, full height in others, carrying drainage, waste compression, and grey water lines. Staff called it the basement because everybody needs simple words for ugly places. The basement had changed. White-painted copper runs lined the bulkheads where plain, insulated pipe should have been. Blue starburst badges had been screwed onto junction covers. One line ended in a frost-thick manifold above a drain basin. Water dripped in slow, clear ropes from the lip of a pipe and failed to splash. Each drop held shape like glass fruit. A man crouched behind stacked towel crates with a wrench in one hand and a kitchen knife in the other. "Say your name before I swing," he said. "Swing, and I'll kick your teeth in, Luis." His shoulders dropped. "That'll be you then." Luis Ortega worked engineering support on the lower decks. Old cargo hauler background, broad hands, bad knees, and the talent of keeping broken equipment alive years past the date any company accountant would approve. If something leaked, rattled, seized, or cooked itself, Luis usually insulted it first and fixed it second. We'd patched enough emergency plumbing together at 3 a.m. to know how each other thought. "I heard Haldane's boys above," he said. "That stopped fast. They're hanging in place. I saw one of those sales bastards bolt a breakfast table where the reactor board used to stand." He looked up toward the deck overhead. made me hate him in a personal way. I eased down beside him. "What do you know?" He pointed along the frost-lined pipes. "The refrigerators are the new engine grid, not props. They're feeding the house pattern through the ship's service trunks. Every looped room, every stuck corridor, every domestic trick, there's a branch backing it. Cut pressure to the branch and the room remembers it's a room." Pressure? Call it whatever plain word suits you. It's running through pipe, cable and rule all at once. A dead electrician lay 10 feet away behind a valve bank, with both hands locked around a pipe and his face turned toward the wall. Mr. Cordell's voice came down through a vent grill overhead. "Mr. Foster, the service corps awaits your inspection." Luis looked at me. "You know him?" "He knows me." That sat between us for a beat. Above, Cordell went on in the same pleasant tone, but now with the flattery of a manager praising a man who has carried too much for too long. "You maintain every level. You cross all thresholds. You know what fails first. Temporary administration overlooked your office. We are correcting that error." Luis mouthed the last part with silent disgust. The truth had already started taking shape under all the panic. My rounds, my keys, my habit of moving through every deck unseen by the people who bought tickets. The salesman had read all of it as household authority. On a ship that sold itself as luxury, the man who fixed toilets and stuck doors had become, in their eyes, the one who truly belonged. I pitched my voice toward the vent. "The lower service design is fighting your install. Cold bleed in the utility lines. If you want the house to hold, I inspect the basement first." Silence. Then Cordell said with sharp professional interest, "An excellent catch. We will escort." Luis stared at me. "You just told the monsters their workmanship was sloppy." Men like that ache for approval. 2 salesmen came down into the basement by the cargo ladder carrying polished toolboxes. Cordell stayed above. The others treated me with awful courtesy, holding panel doors open, stepping aside in narrow runs, waiting while I knelt by the white lines and touched fittings already rimed in frost. I played the part because work teaches a man how to look busy while stealing time. "This tie-in is poor," I said at one valve bank. One salesman bent close at once. "We welcome your standards." "The drain angle on this branch is wrong. Utility return will push into the guest flooring on 12. He wrote that down in a little order booklet with blue-lined pages. Everywhere I looked, the basement translated itself further. Drain basins widened into utility sinks. Tool pegs arranged themselves into neat rows. Shelving shifted toward pantry order. The alien logic liked hidden service spaces best, because those spaces already held the bones of a house. Luis shadowed us through a parallel access run, tapping pipe with his wrench whenever he wanted my eyes on a section. We found the main branch near the old heat exchangers. 6 white lines met at a trunk thicker than my torso, each capped with a chrome handwheel and a starburst badge. Frost crusted the deck around it in a wide ring. Beneath the frost, the plating had started to turn into black and white tile. There it was. The throat. I knelt beside it and dragged a finger through the frost. Pain bit to the bone. The cold lived beyond temperature. It carried waiting with it. Coats to hang, meals due, lights to switch on at dusk. A child told to wash up. A husband expected home. Routine so hungry it could eat a ship. I pulled my hand back. The salesman by my shoulder asked, eager as a junior repairman, "Do you approve?" "Utility side needs relief cuts. Too much pressure on the branch lines." I pointed along a wall run leading toward deck 12. "If that one ruptures, your haul loops fail." He looked where I pointed. "Go get me an adjustable key," I said. "Long handle, white grip. We can provide any household implement. Then move." He went. When his shoes faded, Luis slid out of the shadow run and crouched beside me. "How much can you damage before they spot it?" "As much as a janitor can manage with bad tools and a lie." He pressed a pry bar into my palm. That carried me through 38 years of other people's optimism. We worked fast. Pry bar into the frost ring, wrench on the handwheel. One of my flat steel pass keys fit between the valve collar and seat. Luis wrapped a rag around the bulging seal line. I jammed the key in and levered sideways with all my weight. The seal tore. A sheet of white, glittering cold burst across the deck. Somewhere deep in the wall, a cupboard door slammed. Luis cranked the handwheel open. Something inside the trunk banged 3 times, then let go. Up on deck 12, metal screamed. The ship lurched under a chain of sounds, glass breaking, furniture scraping, voices rising all at once into language again. Luis laughed once, wild and ugly. "That's a room remembering itself." A salesman shouted from the far ladder. We ran. In the service bay, we nearly slammed into my own janitor's cart, standing abandoned beside the wall. The sight of that dull grey bucket and mop handle among all the white alien trim hit me harder than the salesman had. My life had followed me into the basement like a witness. I grabbed the bleach caddy and a bottle of floor stripper. Luis took a sack of powdered drain cleaner from the rack. A salesman lunged from the left-hand access run. Luis swung the wrench and broke the man's cheek open. Under the split skin, white chips spilled across the deck with a dry clatter. The painted smile stayed fixed. I hurled the stripper in his eyes. It ran over the red paint and raised it in curls. He staggered, making a sound like dishes sliding in a cupboard. The family lounge door on 12 blew outward into the service hall. The mother I'd rescued stumbled through with her little girl under one arm and a real boy under the other, both children screaming at once. Behind them, the false living room set collapsed inward on itself. The looped boy vanished with it. People poured from nearby cabins and alcoves where they had hidden. The old house rhythm had broken enough to release them. For one brief minute, the deck belonged to human panic again. That counted as a win. It also turned me into a signal fire. "Foster!" Jade came limping down the promenade in steward blacks. Blood across one palm, bruise swelling around one eye. Relief hit her face when she saw me. She nearly showed it, then didn't. "The vase kept putting me back at the alcove," she said. "I smashed it on the 5th pass." Luis gave her a look that almost passed for admiration. "Sound thinking." More people crowded the hall. A rich old man in slippers. A croupier still clutching the plastic shoe from a gaming table. 2 galley boys. A spa attendant with towel pins still clipped to her collar. They all looked at me. I'd spent 15 years crossing decks while eyes slid past me. Then one broken loop, one opened route, and the whole crowd fixed on me at once. That kind of change goes straight to the weakest part of a man. "There's a hold point in scullery 12, I said. "Shutters down. Lights on. Stay off the main guest corridors. Jade, take them." She nodded once and started driving people along with more force than her size promised. A well-dressed passenger caught my sleeve. "My husband is in the dining room." Luis leaned close. "If we cut 2 more branches, we might lose a whole stack of rooms." The right choice sat in plain view. Go for the trunk. Free whoever that frees. Keep moving. The passenger's fingers dug deeper into my sleeve. "Please." I changed course. The dining hall on 11 was one of the Valhalla's showrooms, all polished wood trim and star view windows, a place where passengers paid extra for tasting menus and staff were instructed to smile with their whole lives. We came at it through the service side. The swinging kitchen door had turned into a white pantry door with a little glass pane. Inside, the room held the instant before the first course. Every chair had been drawn back. Every napkin rested on a lap. A waiter leaned in with a bottle poised over crystal. The passengers all wore that same small forward tilt people take when they are ready to begin. Their mouths had parted around conversation that never reached the next word. The husband stood near the center, hand on the chair back. The whole room had a shine to it now, too clean, too aligned, every place setting corrected towards some domestic ideal that restaurant service had only ever imitated. Luis scanned the walls. Branch lines close. Jade, who had come with us despite the bruise and limp, pointed to a service panel near the wine station. Ice line access. I ripped it open. White pipe again, crusted at the fittings. A little compressor unit sat inside where the chiller feed used to run, stamped with the blue starburst. Back up, I said. Luis poured drain cleaner along the casing seam. I jammed the pry bar under the lid and hauled. The metal buckled. Jade shoved the broken stem of a table candle through the gap. The wax in it still held a little heat from the room's false supper. Luis struck a spark tool against the broken lip. The chemicals took fire in a flat white flare. The unit burst. Every person in the dining room lurched forward together as time slammed back through them. Wine splashed, glass shattered, chairs tipped. One woman screamed until her face darkened. The husband dropped to his knees and grabbed at the carpet as though the floor might run from him. His wife rushed past me and threw herself around him. Another rescue, another room returned. That should have been all. Instead, every ceiling light in the hall went warm and soft, the way old suburban houses look in serial dramas when the breadwinner comes home. Mr. Cordell stood at the far end with 6 salesmen behind him. He carried my janitor's cart. One hand rested on the mop handle as if it were a ceremonial staff. "Mr. Foster," he said, "your interventions show instinct. Instinct is rarer than rank." The corridor behind him had changed while we worked. Guest cabin doors had become white doors with brass knobs. A framed print of ducks in flight hung where the extinguisher should have been. A shoe rack sat under a sconce. Luis went for the side access hatch. The hatch folded inward into a pantry door that opened on shelves, jars, and another pantry door beyond. He hit the frame shoulder first and bounced back with a curse. One salesman stepped in and struck him across the ribs with a chrome toolbox. He went down hard. Jade dragged one of the revived passengers toward the kitchen. The rest scattered, every route suddenly wrong. Cordell raised a hand toward me, gentle as a host inviting a guest to sit. "The ship learns from its caretaker. Come see what your work is making." I took one step back toward Luis. A salesman laid the edge of a refrigerator door against Jade's shoulder. The cold took her in place from the skin inward. She stayed standing, face twisted, hand still reaching toward the kitchen door. Her movement slowed to a crawl I could track only by the blood creeping from the corner of her split lip. Cordell spoke to me alone. "One more refusal, and she remains there as long as the room requires." The whole ship had become bargaining space. Every corridor, every room, every person. "Leave her," I said. The salesman eased the door away. Jade sagged to one knee, alive, sobbing once through clenched teeth. Cordell inclined his head. "Walk with me." I went because I had already put too many lives near the blade. He led me through decks that had crossed the line from cruise ship to house. The promenade had become a strip of front windows, with little tables beneath them. Passengers trapped there kept lifting drinks and turning toward imagined arrivals beyond the glass. A card lounge had become a den where men sat forever on the edge of the next joke. A beauty salon had become a powder room with women touching lipstick to mouths and setting the tubes down again. Cordell didn't narrate much. He didn't need to. His quiet satisfaction made the tour worse. The salesmen ignored the rich. They ignored the officers hanging in stalled gestures. They ignored the men who shouted threats. Their whole attention rested on tidiness, room assignment, thresholds, and me. We stopped at a family corridor, where children ran from a linen closet to a stair landing and back through the same 6 seconds of evening chaos. A mother stood outside the loop beating both fists against the wall until her knuckles split. Cordell touched the door trim. Our home wants settling. Prior management encouraged drift. You're sorting people like place settings. Households sort themselves by use. At the next junction, A laundry room door stood half open. Inside, behind stacked linen carts, Luis sat against the wall with one hand pressed to his side. Blood soaked through his shirt above the hip. He held my gaze without a word. Cordell saw it and smiled. Your serviceman retains value. Good basements require competent support. You want my approval, I said. We seek your partnership. You keep saying resident. You maintain every level. You cross all thresholds. You carry keys. You know what fails first. His voice softened with something that might have passed for reverence if it hadn't been so obscene. Others enjoy the house. You keep it livable. The house chose accurately. There it was in clean language. Picked before boarding. Chosen because my labor looked like sovereignty to something that understood homes only through function. I should have spat in his face. Instead, I said, "Then your basement work still needs correction." Cordell's eyes sharpened with pleasure. "Show me." That bought me another open route. They took me below again with 2 salesmen as escort. Luis came along under watch, one hand clamped over his wound. I kept talking in the flat, irritated tone of a worker forced to correct somebody else's bad install. Cordell soaked it in like sunlight. We cut more branch lines in the next hour than I'd expected to reach in a full shift. Every time I named a fault, the salesman leaned in. Every time one moved to fetch a tool or check a pressure run, Luis and I wrecked something a little larger. A lounge broke free, then a suite corridor, then a section of the casino where gamblers had spent a quarter hour trying to place the same bet. The freed came out half broken. One man's fingertips had split raw from clawing the same armrest through loop after loop. A woman spoke the first 3 words of the same sentence 4 times before the rest of language caught up. A croupier kept slapping invisible cards into his own palm until Jade seized both wrists and held them still. Jade stayed with us after the dining room, one arm tight against her ribs, one eye swelling shut, refusing help from anyone. Luis grew slower. Blood kept finding fresh paths through his shirt. Every time I told him to stay put, he cursed my whole family line and limped on. At the 3rd broken branch, survivors started calling for me by name. "Hank, my wife's still in the suites." "Foster, there's a child on 9. "Sir, over here." The first name use from strangers should have warmed me. It made me sick instead. They were turning me into a foreman in a place where foremen decided which room a soul belonged in. Cordell saw it too. He let the pressure build until there was nowhere for me to stand except the center. He chose the recreation deck for the next move. It had become a living room vast enough for a block party. Sofas in islands, lamp tables, drinks carts, framed family photos full of faces that blurred when I tried to hold them. Survivors crowded one side under the watch of salesmen. Luis sat on a sofa because standing had become stubbornness without sense. Jade stood near him, gripping a fireplace poker like a spear. Cordell approached me carrying a polished ring of chrome keys and a white utility belt with loops for tools I didn't recognize. "Your household resists full settlement because its resident refuses office," he said. "Accept function, and rooms will answer more gently. Refuse further, and the present adjustments continue." He nodded toward one wall. It slid open. Beyond it lay the launch bay access hall. 30 or 40 free survivors huddled there within sight of the lifeboat gantries. Safety sat one corridor away. Then another panel opened on the opposite side. Luis's service hatch had become a pantry cell. Behind the little glass pane, I saw the scullery hold on 12, shutters bent inward, people packed shoulder to shoulder. One child was the little girl from the family lounge. Her mother pounded the shutter and called for help I could barely hear. Cordell spread his hands. "A stable resident can direct orderly passage. An absent one leaves souls to drift into utility." That was the bargain. Take the role, save some, refuse and watch the ship finish sorting itself. The honest version of me had already been outvoted by the practical one. What happens if I accept? I asked. Cordell's painted smile deepened in tiny cracks. You keep house. Luis turned his head toward me. His face carried anger, pity, contempt, and understanding all at once. You know what he means. I did. Give me the keys, I said. Jade made a sound like she'd bitten through her own tongue. Cordell placed the ring in my hand with reverence. The metal carried winter through my palm, then settled to my skin, as if it had waited there for years. He buckled the white utility belt around my waist. The ship changed in response. Door frames straightened, wall seams aligned. A path opened across the recreation deck and all the salesmen stepped back from it together. Somewhere far below, every refrigerator door in the house clicked once. The first key I tried on the launch hall door turned before I finished the motion. I had not yet decided whether that meant the keys worked for me, or I worked for them. The door opened. A lane of clear space ran through the converted hall, bordered by trapped rooms on either side. At one door, a woman stood forever hanging her handbag on a peg. At another, a man bent over a newspaper, never reaching the first line. The edges of those trapped spaces softened in my presence, as though the house expected me to judge them. Survivors pushed toward the lane. Single file, I said. Move when I say move. A businessman in a dinner jacket shoved past an older kitchen porter and nearly knocked him down. The house reacted at once. A hall closet sprang open and cold spread over the floor in a white skin. I pointed at the businessman. The word came out before I could stop it. Waiting room. The closet widened into a little front sitting room with plastic-covered chairs and a side table stacked with magazines. The businessman stumbled in, arms pinwheeling, and the door shut behind him. The lane stabilized. Everyone near me stared. I had just assigned a man to a room the way the salesman did. For 1 second, the corridor held a new silence, born from understanding. I could move people. I could place them. I could condemn them. The worst part was not how fast it happened. The worst part was how natural the command had felt in my mouth. Keep walking, I said. They kept walking. The passage took an age and no time. A mother dragging 2 boys, a dealer from the casino with blood on his cuff, 3 galley hands, the spa attendant, the old porter, Jade limping but upright, Luis last among the group because pride would never let him take an easier place. The lifeboat bay beyond had kept most of its old shape. A bay is too practical a room for fantasy to improve. Boats still hung in their launch cradles, sleek white shells built to reach a station alive rather than comfortable. 2 dock crewmen crouched by the manual release board with improvised clubs in hand. They left this open, one of them said, like they wanted us to see it. They did, Luis muttered. That's how bait works. We started loading boats, children first, injured next. Anybody still steady enough to think got assigned to buckles, hatch checks, seals. I moved among them with the chrome keys clinking at my hip like gilt made metal. A woman in resort linen grabbed my arm before boarding. My husband is in the dining room. We brought out who we could. He was still breathing. You can get him. The boat behind her was half full. Departure tones had started a soft pulse through the bay. Somewhere in the ship beyond us, doors kept clicking, measuring. If I go back for every husband and wife and son on this ship, nobody leaves. You decide who stays. The answer had already become yes. She slapped me across the face. Jade caught her from behind and hauled her toward the hatch. The woman fought like grief had put current through her joints. The house stirred at the disorder. Frost spread from the bay threshold in silver veins across the deck. A word rose in me with awful ease. Parlour. The side chamber by the threshold opened at once, all soft lamps and couches. The woman stumbled inside with my name in her mouth. The door shut. Jade stared at me. The bruise around her eye had darkened almost black. You bastard! Get in the boat! The first boat went, then the second. Then the third jammed on the cradle because the old release rail had warped under a skin of frost. I crawled into the access slot with a hand crank and cleared the lock myself, while a child above me cried for her mother, and a man behind her whispered prayers to a god rich enough to buy passage. When the third boat dropped free, the whole bay shuddered. Cordell stood in the threshold with 4 salesmen behind him. He watched the departing boats through the outer aperture, as if admiring a suburban driveway at dusk. "You provide excellent transition," he said. "Move, and I'll put you in the furnace room." His smile widened. "Useful threats improve every household." Luis braced himself on the launch rail. "There are still people on 9 and 11. Family corridor, dining hall. You've still got enough pull to reach them." He meant go back. The open bay behind us held maybe 60 breathing souls. The route had stayed stable only because I kept naming order into it. If I left, the house might fold the whole access lane into some fresh ritual and pull them back toward the nearest warm room. Luis knew that. He asked anyway. That was why I liked him. "There are too many," I said. "There were too many from the start." A teenage boy stood by the third boat hatch, refusing to board without his little sister. His father had one arm around him and could not move him. "She's on 9, the father said to me. "Please." The house had an answer ready. A neat little side room opened near the bay, lamp already on, chairs waiting. The logic pressed on me. Settle him there, keep the lane clear, launch the boat. My mouth moved. Waiting room. The boy's struggle softened. His face went slack with horror as the room took hold and drew him sideways 2 steps. His father howled and lunged. Jade and a dockman wrestled the man back into the hatch while I closed the door on the boy with my own hand. The boat launched under the father's screams. That was the ugliest thing I had ever done. It also kept 40 people moving toward open space. Cordell gave a tiny, approving nod that made me want to tear his throat out. Boat after boat cleared. The bay emptied. Survivors vanished into black on torching drives. Luis stayed for the last one. Blood had soaked his whole waistband by then. "Get in," I told him. He looked at the keys on my belt. "You already know who stays with the house." "I can still break the core." "And if the core's tied to you now?" I didn't answer because I had already started to suspect the truth of it. The doors had answered faster each time. The lane held when I commanded it. The house had started using my instincts before I'd admitted the bargain aloud. He climbed into the final boat anyway, then turned in the hatch and held my gaze. A man can survive a ruin. Surviving himself takes rougher work. The hatch sealed. The last boat launched. Silence settled over the bay in its wake, broken only by the distant cabinet rattle note of the converted ship around me. Cordell stepped beside me and watched the retreating points of light. "Your people depart in good order," he said. "They're not my people. You still speak like a tenant." He led me downward because there was nowhere else to go. The route into the core had become a house's secret heart. Utility halls widened into basement corridors. Bulkhead ribs hid behind painted paneling. Laundry chutes became dumbwaiters. Tool racks became tidy shelves full of labelled jars and folded drop cloths. Behind one wall, a washing machine turned forever through the same load with no water sound, only a wet slap and restart. The core lay where the fusion spine had once ruled the ship. Now it stretched beyond the room that should have contained it. A basement no cruiser could physically hold opened beneath banks of lights hung on pull chains. Refrigerator after refrigerator stood in rows that ran past sight. Each door held a little frost window. Through one window I saw the family corridor, children trapped in their run. Through another, I saw the dining hall, half the guests revived, half still snagged in the returning instant. Another held the front promenade with its endless cocktails and arrivals. The Valhalla had become a neighborhood of sealed rooms. At the center stood a workbench and a breaker board. Above the board hung a plaque in cheerful script. Home Management. Break it, I said. Release them all. Cordell spread one hand toward the refrigerator field. You now provide occupancy. While occupancy holds, the converted block keeps its boundaries. If you tear out the core without stabilizing those boundaries, the house will answer the loss the way it answers all loss. It will retrieve. Every departure through its thresholds becomes unfinished business. He opened the nearest refrigerator door for me. Inside the inner panel, where a butter shelf should have been, a little monitor showed black space and the lifeboats burning away from us. As the door opened, their drives shortened. Their noses began to tilt back toward the Valhalla. Returning home. I slammed the door shut. The boat steadied, then crawled forward again. Cordell watched my face with something close to tenderness. A vacant house reaches for what is left. A settled one keeps what remains. So that was the full trap. The keys, the belt, the room assignments, every command I had spoken, each one had tied the occupied side of the ship more tightly to me. Not by magic words alone, but by function. I had become the rule that held the rooms in place. Break the rule too fast, and the whole occupied block would lunge after whatever had escaped it. My own choices had built the final cage. I crossed to the breaker board and put both hands on the main lever. A hard pull would rip something loose. Maybe everything. Maybe enough. Through a dozen frost windows, faces looked back from trapped rooms, passengers, staff, people I had failed to reach. The scullery hold on 12 stood empty now. Good. The family corridor still held children. Bad. The waiting room held the businessman from the hall. The parlour held the woman from the bay. The side chamber near launch held the boy waiting for his sister. Outside, the lifeboats moved farther into black. If I tore the house down entirely, it would grab for them. If I settled it, the boats would clear. That left one honest road. Show me the boundary lock, I said. Cordell's smile deepened with holy satisfaction. Of course, sir. He took me to a brass wheel set in the floor beneath a porch light fixture. House brass on cruiser deck plating. Around it ran enamel markers for the sections the conversion had claimed. Forward hall, dining, family, utility, sitting, launch threshold, guest row, service row. Turn to occupied, Cordell said. I spat on his shoe. He accepted that too. I put both hands on the wheel and turned. The ship groaned from keel to dome. Deep in the rows of refrigerators, compressor notes rose and fell in one vast household sigh. Frost crawled along the marked boundary lines, then stopped at clean edges. Outside the nearest monitor, the lifeboat drives burned bright and held course. I kept turning until the wheel locked. Something settled through the house at that moment, the way a body settles into a chair after a long day's work. Every converted room took its place. Every unconverted section beyond the lock cut free, as if the Valhalla had amputated part of herself to save what remained. Cordell bowed. Around us, the salesmen began to leave. They did not march out in triumph. They simply picked up toolboxes, clipped shut order books, and walked between the refrigerator rows toward a white back door with a little half window glowing beyond it. One by one they stepped through and vanished. Cordell stood last. You have earned full residency, he said. Take your house and choke on it. He adjusted his tie with 2 fingers. The house is yours by labor, function, and consent. Then he left through the back door and closed it softly behind him. I stood alone in the basement core with the keys at my hip and the ruined ship spread through white cabinets around me. Time passed. Minutes maybe, longer maybe. Once the house answered to me, time took on a personal quality. That was the filthiest part. At length I began to walk. There are tasks after catastrophe. A place still needs keeping if life remains inside it. One refrigerator on the service row had developed ice along the hinge. I chipped it free with a putty knife from the workbench. A drain pan under dining needed emptying. 3 trapped men in the den loop had begun colliding at the same chair arm. I widened that room's assignment 2 feet so their bodies would last longer. The family corridor on 9 still held the children. I stood outside that door for a long time with my hand on the knob. Releasing them would have destabilized the whole row. I knew that because the house told me so, in the pressure of the handle and the pull of the boundary under my feet. I left them where they ran, and went to the next task like a coward with a schedule. That is the plain truth. The Valhalla still lives, or half of her does. The free section drifted off under automatic distress protocols once the lock took hold. The occupied side stays with me, a clipped-off neighborhood sailing black between stars. Through the promenade windows, space looks like evening beyond a picture frame. In the dining room, guests wait forever for the first course, unless I grant them a few minutes more. In the parlor, the woman from the bay sits with her handbag on her lap, ready to demand her husband again. In the waiting room, the boy keeps listening for his sister on the stairs. I walk my rounds with a chrome keyring and a white utility belt. A janitor learns a ship by what breaks first. A house teaches the same lesson. Doors swell, pipes seize, frost creeps where it should not. Little failures bloom in corners. I fix them because the alternative reaches the lifeboats I sent away and the living people inside them. My work keeps them free. My work keeps this place shut around itself. The rich men who ignored me have no use for me now. The captain still hangs 3 decks up in a frozen act of command, pistol raised, blood bead bright on his cheek. Renner is somewhere forward, still caught in that halted gallery, unless the cut carried him free. Jade boarded one of the early boats without looking back. Luis may have bled out in his boat or reached a station with enough truth left to tell them what the Valhalla became. Maybe rescue will come. Maybe some patrol ship will find a luxury liner adrift with half a suburb growing inside it. Maybe they will call on Broadbeam and ask for the commanding officer. They'll get me. I know where every key goes. I know which rooms can bear adjustment and which will pull a whole row sideways into evening. I know how long a trapped meal can be stretched before people break beyond usefulness. I know how to keep the lights warm in the sitting rooms and the frost from thickening on the family doors. The house chose accurately. That sentence keeps coming back. A man can spend half his life being unseen. Then something from the dark looks straight at him and says, "There you are." That can ruin him faster than hatred ever could.